All right, so today's episode of Snake Stories is one that I've been wanting to do for a little bit, but then of course I got caught up in all my life stuff and making my content and trying to make a living off my content. I've talked about it enough times at this point, so I'm not going to go into that again. That's not what this episode is about. For those of you who have checked out Stability Music, you might know that my Friday Night Funkin' remixes are among my most viewed tracks out there. I know that my remix of Blammed is up there at the top. My remix of Last Chance from the Tabby mod is up there at the top. I believe my remix of Genocide also got pretty high up. But if I'm being honest, I am kind of ashamed of that fact today. And the reason for that is not because of the community behind Friday Night Funkin', even though that has a whole bunch of issues of its own. No, my issue is with the game itself and how long the full-ass game is taking alongside all of the bizarre development decisions the Funkin' crew have made. So I'm just going to be spending today's episode ranting and talking about that. Context time. When Friday Night Funkin' first started seeing serious pursuit of its development, there were a lot of things wrong with it from a rhythm game design standpoint. And in fact, in some old videos on Snakes DeLeo CH, I talk about those problems and why it is a objectively poorly designed rhythm game. Stuff like the individual assets for each song being scattered in different places across the game's file hierarchy. Or even the complete inability to import custom songs due to so much of the game's data being hard-coded. A lot of these issues were sort of addressed with the Weekend 1 update, but we're still nowhere near what I would consider good rhythm game design. There are still some assets in the file hierarchy, last I checked, as of Weekend 1, where I believe when it comes to storing songs, the audio for a given song is still in one location, while the charts for that same song are stored in a different location. Why? When you're designing a rhythm game and you want it to support custom songs and even a modding engine, which the Funkin' crew promised in the Kickstarter for the full game, you want custom songs to be able to be imported cleanly as a single self-contained package. Look at, for example, Clone Hero and Yarg. The audio, the chart, the preview image, and the metadata are all stored within that same folder, and when you import them, they do not get separated. The only thing that is stored in a separate piece of data is the high score that you got on the song, but that's not quite as important if you're going to be sharing custom songs around. And the real way to address this would be to rebuild the game from the ground up in an engine like Unity or Godot, which are actually competent at handling stuff at this type of scale. But for some reason, the Funkin' crew continue to insist on using Haxflixel for their development of Friday Night Funkin'. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 came with another update that I believe was released last year, or towards the end of last year or something like that. I mean, I already had issues from Weekend 1. When I downloaded that update, the first thing that happened when I opened a song was I was just fidgeting with the keys before the song started, and the game crashed due to a null object reference error. I have videos explaining this on my channel from back when Weekend 1 released 2 years ago. So I could already tell from the outset that update, when it first dropped, was not play tested, because that null object reference exception that killed the game was such a widely reported problem, they issued a hotfix within like 48 hours of the update dropping. And I called it redemption, but I really shouldn't have. There was no reason to release an update that people had been waiting on for literally 2 years in such a broken state that tons of players were reporting this problem from the outset. The game literally crashed when you would complete a song. So that was when my relationship with Friday Night Funkin' started to become a little bit contentious. Because I was like, holy shit, we literally waited 2 years There were 2 years of mostly silence from the Funkin' crew. We weren't sure what they were doing with the money that had been put into the Kickstarter campaign. I myself didn't donate, but I had heard from a lot of people who had, and they were becoming frustrated that there was no updates coming out and no communication regarding what they were doing with the game. And when the Weekend 1 update finally came out and it crashed when you would finish a song, that was just a massive slap to the face. But more recently, there was another update that came out. I don't remember when exactly this was anymore, but I think I posted my knee-jerk reaction to it on Discord. It was a new update that added some stuff. I believe it was the Friday Night Funkin' and BTS update. Yeah, it was the update where they released a BTS tie-in, which was crazy to me. Like, I don't even know how they got a group with like that much influence to agree to the licensing or collaboration or whatever with it. But it was that update where I really found this problem that I wanted to talk about in this episode of Snake Stories. And that problem has to do with something called the offset setting. For those who are unfamiliar with what a competently designed rhythm game should look like, an offset setting basically pushes all of the notes that you see in the chart forwards or backwards in time by a handful of milliseconds. And the reason why the offset setting is so important is because of something called latency, which is basically the delay between when you push a button on your input device, be that a keyboard, mouse, or whatever, and when it registers as an input on your machine. Latency is also a factor in the delay between when your machine plays a sound and when you actually hear it through your headphones or speakers or whichever device you're using. For the longest time, Friday Night Funkin' had an inherent latency that nothing could be done about. Tons of players reported this issue into week 7 and beyond. If you hit one of the keys perfectly on time, when you saw a note hit the judgment panel, the delay is so significant that what would otherwise have been a sick on that hit gets downgraded to a good through no fault of your own. You hit the key perfectly on time, but the game decided it was going to delay the recognition of that input. And that is why an offset setting is so important and why I harped on it for so long during the time that I was regularly playing Friday Night Funkin'. And when the first versions of Cade Engine came out, they addressed this perfectly. They just put an offset setting into the game long before it was ever added to the base game in the Weekend 1 update. Which, by the way, the Weekend 1 update came out years after the original Ludum Dare Game Jam version of the game. Why did it take so long to add this basic design feature to a rhythm game? This is literally Rhythm Game Design 101, and it should have been addressed the moment the Funkin' crew realized that they were going to be taking this game's development seriously. But you know what further convinced me that the Funkin' crew actually don't know shit about what makes a good rhythm game and what makes a rhythm game competently designed? In this recent update with the BTS tie-in, they removed the offset setting from the game completely. Gone. Reduced to atoms. There is no offset setting in the latest version of the game. And adding insult to injury, when they first added this offset setting, it also had a really nice calibration wizard. And when it pertains to offset for rhythm games specifically, a calibration wizard is typically something where the game plays a simple song or drum pattern, and you have to hit the keys as they come up on the screen. Then, based on the amount of delay between when you hit the keys and when the inputs are actually registered, the game recommends an amount of offset to add, which you can then either set in some games automatically or do it on your own and just keep the number that the game gave to you in mind. Friday Night Funkin' had this when it added the offset setting to Weekend 1. Weekend 1 not only had an offset setting, but it had a calibration wizard. It was ready to ship as a basic, competently designed rhythm game. Why did they remove the offset setting? And it's not even that, the latency is bad enough. Without the calibration wizard and without any sort of offset setting in general, if you've ever played any actually competently designed rhythm game in your life, be it Clone Hero or Muse Dash or Yarg or DJ Max Respect V or Quaver or Osu or whatever, one of the biggest advantages an offset setting provides is that once you know that any potential latency from the game to your input device has been addressed, you can trust yourself when you're playing the game. Without an offset setting, when I try to play Friday Night Funkin', I can no longer trust myself. Even if all of the notes I'm hitting are scoring as sick hits, I have no way of knowing if that's just because they decided to increase the size of the hit window because they removed the offset setting, like in response to that, or if I'm just barely hitting the edge of the sick to good line and I need to start adjusting my inputs to hit earlier because the latency in the game was a well-established problem prior to the addition of the offset setting. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. The removal of the offset setting from Friday Night Funkin' destroys confidence in your ability to play the game the way you expect to be able to play it. And I mean it when I say that this is one of the most stupid, boneheaded, imbecilic decisions I have ever seen the Funkin' crew make. Because like I said, this is rhythm game design 101. If you want your rhythm game to be taken seriously as a rhythm game, or if you just want it to be playable in some circumstances, because some people have hardware that has latency that is extremely noticeable and almost impossible to overcome without offset, you need to add an offset setting to your rhythm game because it's all about timing. And when there is stuff that messes with your timing, whether it be through the game or the hardware you're running the game on, it's just inexcusable. I don't understand why the Funkin' crew removed the offset setting, and people who are fans of the game can say different, but something that this removal of the offset setting made clear to me is that the Funkin' crew do not have the actual functionality of their game in their interests at heart. What this removal of the offset setting told me is the Funkin' crew care more about having, the neat artwork, the animation, the catchy music. They don't care how it actually feels to try and hit the keys when you're actually playing in time to that music. And when I'm at a point where I would legitimately rather be playing Psych Engine than the base game, I think there are some priorities in Friday Night Funkin's development that need to be reevaluated. Offset is not some optional quality of life thing. It is a crucial component in rhythm game design. And that's why I've kept coming back to it this episode, because there was literally no reason whatsoever in this BTS update for it to be removed. And I think this episode is the perfect place for me to make an announcement pertaining to Friday Night Funkin' and how it will make future appearances on my channel. Because much like Markiplier's reaction to Poppy Playtime Chapter 5, after having seen this removal of the offset setting from the game, I just can't anymore. This is all basic stuff that you don't even need to do intensive research on, I don't think. You just need to play enough rhythm games to be able to pick up on these types of things. Guitar Hero 3 has an offset setting. And back when I played Guitar Hero 3 on my Wii, I recognized even then, when I didn't know anything else about rhythm games, that making sure my offset was correct was important, so that all of my inputs on my guitar would register correctly on the Wii and then go into my TV and be reflected back at me. I mean, this is just another episode of Crash Out Snake at this point, but I am actually getting so upset. So this is the episode of Snake Stories and the piece of content where I announce I am not playing Friday Night Funkin' anymore on my channel or on my live streams or whatever. I have straight up just uninstalled the game because these design decisions that have been made by the Funkin' crew have just been like, I don't even know what kinds of drugs they spent that $1 million or whatever raised for the game. I mean, it's something that a lot of people joked about in light of the prolonged silence regarding updates and whatnot over those 2 years that we waited for Weekend 1. But a small part of me is like actually legitimately convinced that some amount of that fund was spent on drugs, because you would have to be on drugs to make this kind of decision when pushing out an update. And again, there's also just the whole fiasco when Weekend 1 was originally released and the game would crash upon completing a song. Yeah, I'm just done. I'm just done with Friday Night Funkin', and who knows? Maybe the offset setting will be put back in a future update or when the full-ass game releases. I don't know, because I'm not going to be there. So yeah, that's about it for this episode of Snake Stories. You've just tuned in to hear me crash out about this one thing that may sound like a small thing, but again, if you play enough rhythm games, you would know that it's a fundamental component of design that cannot be overlooked, and the Funkin' crew have just decided to overlook it anyway. If you liked this episode, then be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Do all that other algorithmic garbage that this podcast was created for. If you like the background music, you can hear more of it at Stability Music. A link will be down in the description, and there will also be a link to the music that you will hear in the outro. But yeah, I think that'll be about it for this episode of Snake Stories. Thanks for listening, everyone. I will talk to you all later.